Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back with some Knowledgia. This time, how was England formed? Now, before we dive into the video, I would like to point you down to the description box or my pinned comment in the comment section below, where I have various links. I have a link to my Twitch channel where I stream Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Fridays, and Saturdays from 6 p.m. US Central Standard Time to about 9 p.m. US Central Standard Time. The other link that's important is my gaming channel here on YouTube, where I am just uploading old streams too. I would love to have you guys throw me a follow over at Twitch and come join the chat when I'm live. We have a great time over at Twitch. Now, how was England formed? Well, those that do not know, I wrote my thesis pretty much on, well, not necessarily on the formation of England. However, a sub part of my thesis, I did actually write about like this beginning belief of common identity among the Anglo-Saxons, of this kind of English or Anglican idea was starting to really take hold, and really part of my argument in my thesis as to why Alfred was able to hold off the Vikings as well as what he was able to is because of the forming of this common identity among the Anglo-Saxons. So I argued, my argument was essentially, in my thesis, I pretty much argued why Alfred was able to be so successful in holding off the Vikings. And as part of that argument, I mentioned the importance of this growing idea of an English identity. So this is actually something I know quite a decent bit about. I'm curious, this is only 10 minutes. And so I'm curious what kind of information they're going to brush over, because now for those that may not know, I love Knowledgia. Knowledgia makes great content. I've reacted to them before. They've commented. They're an amazing channel, great people. So just gonna put forward my bias towards Knowledgia. Let you guys know that I am biased towards Knowledgia and that I do like their videos. I do think they're going to do a good job. So there's a bias here. As usually, most of the channels I react to, I definitely have a positive bias towards. But anyways, getting that out of the way, curious here what information is going to be in it and what information is kind of going to be brushed over. So that was a 3-minute rant or tangent. Let's go ahead, dive right in.
The existence of England is one that is often taken for granted and looked at far too scarcely. This may be due to the overshadowing history of the development of Great Britain and the United Kingdom.
Yeah, no, I entirely agree with that.
But nonetheless, in order for these unions to be formed,
and you know what? I think you can blame the Victorians. The Victorians, another thing in my thesis that I pretty much railed on the Victorians. They fucked so many things up. But the Victorians pushed for this idea of Britishness. This thing of Britishness, British amazingness or whatever, right? And when you do that, you kind of then overshadow the English identity, right? At least that's how I look at it.
England had to already exist, and it actually has since 927 AD.
Ooh, I like that unification of Anglo-Saxons and Danes. That is important, because if we actually want to talk about the unification of Angles and the Saxons, you can actually point more towards Alfred the Great's reign. So that would be around, what was the year? I think it was around 883. I think it was around the 880s when Alfred was starting to be recognized as king of Anglo-Saxons. He was no longer being just referred to as king of the West Saxons. He was being referred to as king of the Anglo-Saxons. Now, of course, to be extremely specific, he was referred to like he would be king of all Anglo-Saxons except for those under Danish rule or something like that. I can't remember the exact specifics. It's been a few months since I wrote this thesis. So, yeah.
So how was England created? Who claims the land before the English, and how did it become the nation that we know today?
All right, where are we starting? Where? Ooh, all
As
the
the
way.
Roman Empire began to fade from the British Isles, the area of modern-day England started to see a wave of migration from Anglo-Saxon Germanic tribes. According to some historians, after the Romans left, the native Britons came under attack from the nearby Picts and Scots, and subsequently welcomed some of these Anglo-Saxons in hopes that they would push out the other invaders.
Okay, there's some context here that needs to be established. And it's okay that they brushed over this. So when Emperor Honorius, Honorius, he was the emperor that called for, well, the legions to leave Rome. He gave away England. He was like, nope, we're leaving Britain. We're out. And by the way, Britain was pretty much a useless territory for the Romans. It wasn't really all that useful, to be honest. It wasn't that profitable of a territory. Even Emperor Nero, I believe it was Nero, he wanted, actually, there's some people that argue that Nero wanted Boudica to successfully kill the legion that was stationed in, I think it was Londinium, or London. I believe that's where the battle took place. But then when his legion won the battle, he was like, shit, we gotta stay, right? He wanted an excuse to leave Britain. But the legion somehow survived, and he couldn't leave. Now then, going back to Honorius and his, I guess, the leaving of the legions from Britain, this essentially brought Britain to ruin. The complete economy of Britain collapsed, like utterly collapsed. The people split apart. It pretty much reverted to pre-Roman times. A very warrior-like, I guess, barbarian system. And this is one of the few, if not the only Roman province that this happened with, where they went for a century or two of complete, like, I guess, barbarism. Whereas in the other Roman provinces like Iberia, North Africa, France, all of these were, there was the Germanic migrations, Visigoths, the Goths, etc. They pretty much moved in as soon as the empire fell, and so those places never reverted to these pre-Roman, systems, unlike Britain. Britain crashed. And then, so what the cities, the local leaders would do is, they would invite a lot of Saxons over to act as mercenaries. And then the Saxons, the Angles and the Saxons and the Jutes, eventually they realized they have the military power, and so then they started to take over.
The Germanic peoples were successful in expelling both the Scots and Picts, but they then turned on the native Britons and established their own authority by the start of the 7th century. The new Anglo-Saxon rulers then installed the kingdoms of Essex, Kent, Sussex, Mercia, East Anglia, Northumbria, and Wessex on the British mainland. There are minimal records of what happened over the next few centuries throughout these kingdoms, but we do know that it wouldn't be long before the Anglo-Saxons would face invaders of their own.
Yes, okay. So this lack of information here is consistent, right? This is a fact. Up until, so these Saxons that came here were not Catholic. They were pagan. And common theme with pagans, Northern European pagans, is that they don't write things down. So we have very little information here until then information starts getting written again once the Saxons and the Angles start to convert to Christianity. We see the conversion happen, and boom, sources start to prop up out of England again. The sources we have of England of this time period, of where the Saxons first take control, up until then when they, before they were Christianized, is the sources we have there are pretty much Mediterranean sources from Southern Europe, really. So not first-hand accounts from, not really many first-hand accounts coming from the Anglo-Saxons of pagan England quite yet.
In 793, a Viking army landed at the Lindisfarne monastery and raided the sacred building. Their violence and disrespect stunned the Anglo-Saxons, who were unprepared for what these Vikings had in store. By the end of 870, East Anglia fell to the Danish invaders, and Mercia.
Ooh, we are jumping straight. Okay, so in 865, all right, so East Anglia was not the first place to fall. In 865, the Great Heathen Army landed in East Anglia. However, the East Anglian king gave them passage or whatever. And so their first target actually ended up being Northumbria. Northumbria was going through a civil war. The Vikings aided one of the kings. He takes control of Northumbria, and he's essentially as a puppet ruler for the Vikings. This is essentially how the Vikings would fight in England. They would try and prop up a local or a local noble that will serve them pretty much, pay homage to them, pay tribute. And then after Northumbria, they went to Mercia. And essentially they took like half of Mercia. Well, no, they took over most of all of Mercia at first. And then they would go back to East Anglia, Essex, and then Wessex would be the last one. And then in 871, I believe it was, is when they first start fighting in Wessex.
Was lost only 4 years later. As the Vikings seized Northumbria next in 875, Wessex was the only remaining major kingdom under Anglo-Saxon authority. When the current king of Wessex, Ethelred, died, his younger brother Alfred was left to protect his kingdom's independence.
And important thing to note about Alfred is he was the youngest of five brothers. I think he had at least one older sister. I can't remember where she went off to, but I can't remember the names. He had all 4 of his older brothers would die within pretty much a couple years of them being king of Wessex. So for Alfred looking at this, not only is he worried about the Viking invasion, but he's also worried about, the luck that his family has had so far. All of his brothers have died relatively soon after gaining the throne. So he's kind of thinking, oh shit.
At first, he did so by paying off the Viking aggressors until he was eventually prepared to lead an army against them. This culminated in the Battle of Edington, which left the Danes utterly routed and ended their attempts to capture Wessex. A power vacuum in Mercia around the same time resulted in King Alfred also gaining control of the kingdom, and instead of establishing a new monarch, he placed an alderman in charge. This nobleman would answer to King Alfred himself and kept the king of.
Oh, so we completely brushed over Alfred's, which is okay. Alfred ended up getting exiled in 878, and then he came back around, I think, just before 879, still in 878, and Battle of Edington, also kind of referred to wrongly as the Battle of Ecgbert Stone. However, Alfred's army would gather at Ecgbert Stone and then go to Edington to fight Guthrum. And then, yeah, so here with Ethelred, this is where we see Alfred really being regarded as king of the Anglo-Saxons, because here, Ethelred is not king of the Mercians. He is lord of the Mercians. He is referred to as Ealdorman Ethelred, and he always defers when he is, I guess, doing judgment in Mercian court texts or whatever. Alfred is mentioned as being present. Ethelred is not king of Mercia. He is the Ealdorman of Mercia. Alfred, really the king here. All pretty much king, but in name.
Of Wessex as the ultimate authority throughout both regions, although a part of Mercia would be ceded to the Vikings.
Yep, as part of the treaty of, I think it's just referred to as the Treaty of Alfred and Guthrum or something. Yeah, this, and then essentially Alfred would not have any problems really with the Vikings for. While there'd be some minor skirmishes, but essentially he was secure after 878.
After the death of the King of Wessex and the contemporary leader of Mercia in 911, Edward the Elder and Ethelfled each became their respective successors. Together, these new
So the thing about Ethelfled is actually Edward the Elder's sister. I believe older sister. And yeah, she married Ethelred, and then after Ethelred's death, she becomes queen. She's actually referred to as Queen of Mercia. So kind of taking away the power from the Kingdom of Wessex, from Edward. And then when Ethelflaed dies, her daughter becomes Queen of Mercia, and then Edward takes the throne from her and annexes Mercia fully into his kingdom.
Rulers began to increase the pressure that had already been put on the neighboring Danelaw. In 917, Ethelflaed expanded her lands to the north, and Edward was able to incorporate all of East Anglia into his kingdom. As Ethelflaed pushed forward with the expansion, she managed to extend Mercian territory all the way up to York, where the locals decided it would be best to simply pledge loyalty to her as opposed to fighting. Although Ethelflaed shortly died, her daughter, Elfwin, was supposed to take her place and continue on the current course. Unexpectedly, though, the Mercian people quickly ousted their new leader and accidentally created the perfect opportunity for King Edward from Wessex to seize all of Mercia not long after.
I think it's important to note that, Elfwin was his niece.
In 918, the Anglo...
It's okay that they're not mentioning it, but, like, I don't know, I just find it so interesting that he did that.
Anglo-Saxons continued farther.
Which I guess if it's... So I never heard information of that she was ousted before Edward came in, so maybe she would have been left to rule. Edward may have let her rule had the Mercian nobleman not ousted her or something, but I learned it, I remember learning it as Edward just took over his niece's lands.
Into Danelaw territory and slowly gained more and more land for themselves. By the time of Edward's death in 924, the newly acquired neighbors of the Anglo-Saxons had all pledged allegiance to the king. This put the Anglo-Saxons in a confident position as Edward's son, Aethelstan, took over the kingdom.
So there is belief that before Aethelstan, this is debated. It's debated as to whether or not Aethelstan had an older brother that ruled for a little bit and then died really quickly, or if Aethelstan just became king right away, right? I remember hearing that somewhere. I haven't looked too much into it, so I'm not really certain.
Around this time, Etheltan's sister would marry the local Viking ruler, Sitric, who still controlled Northumbria. Aethelstan marched on and was finally able to bring the Kingdom of York under his crown as his sister's husband passed away. This left Northumbria up for grabs, and the king swiftly consolidated it as part of his kingdom. This is generally the time that most historians view the Kingdom of England as having been created. But the situation was not exactly so simple. Aethelstan was not done trying to expand his kingdom however he could, and although he did term himself the King of the English at this point, it was still not quite what we know as England today. Aethelstan decided to give an invasion
Okay, so they're going with the modern state of English border
of Scotland a chance to see if he could reach his authority even further. The Kingdom of Scotland, or as it was known at the time, Alba, was at a disadvantage against the English, and therefore appealed to the other remaining sovereign states for assistance. This prompted an alliance between Constantine II, King of Alba, Olaf Guthrum, King of Dublin, and Owain, King of Strathclyde. With King Olaf at the helm, the alliance faced the English at the spectacular Battle of Brunanburh. Though it is unknown exactly where this battle took place, it is certain that the alliance was severely crushed by the English invaders. The casualties on both sides was disastrously high, but Aethelstan and the English were without a doubt the victors. It's believed by many that this clash may have truly solidified the unity of England and stirred up a new sense of nationalism and pride amongst the English people. Nonetheless, it didn't result in the incorporation of Alba nor Strathclyde into the Kingdom of England, as both stayed independent. England, on the other hand, would have to prove its ability to do so. The Vikings, though temporarily defeated, would return to the young kingdom at the end of the 10th century. After Aethelstan's death in 939, the previously defeated King of Dublin, who was a Viking ruler, took immediate advantage of England's temporary instability. While King Aethelstan's brother Edmund took over the English realm, King Olaf swooped in to reconquer some of the lands that had once been in Viking hands. York was quickly captured, and a large chunk of what used to be Northumbria Northumbria and Mercia was also taken, as he strong-armed the English into accepting this annexation. Ironically, when Olaf died in 941 and his cousin, who shared the same name, was transitioning to the throne as his successor, Edmund of England jumped on the chance to pay the Vikings back for the invasion. The following year, the middle chunk of annexed land was retaken by the English, and in only 2 more years, the Vikings were entirely pushed out of Northumbria. This essentially reunited England, since the
So are they essentially arguing that perhaps Athelstan wasn't really the first king of England, or at least a kingdom of England that would last, right?
the territory was now
That's
all
how I'm seeing it
under
here.
Edmund's control. As ambitious as his ancestors, Edmund next invaded Strathclyde, but only took some of its southern territories by the end of the incursion. The rest was given to King Malcolm I of Scotland, as opposed to joining England. It once again appeared as though the Kingdom of England had established some stability. But this was once more short-lived. Edmund was mysteriously murdered in 946, which left his younger brother, Edred, as King of England. The next year, Eric Bloodaxe from Norway attacked and seized the recently reincorporated Northumbria, which prompted almost a decade of conflicts over who, throughout the Isles, would lead Northumbria. Eventually, the English king was able to once again and permanently reclaim the territory on behalf of England. His death soon ended his reign after this victory, and his young nephew Edwig temporarily succeeded him, but was quickly deposed in favor of his brother Edgar. However, this was only a partial deposition, which meant that Edwig would still hold a small section of the kingdom as a co-ruler. When Edwig died only 2 years after this decision, Edgar simply took over the whole of
As I
England.
said.
Under the reign of King Edgar, known as Edgar the Peaceful, the true foundations of the English kingdom could finally be established. Many reforms were passed, and a vast number of the systems and laws that had existed in the Dane law were actually upheld in hopes of avoiding any displeasure from the Danish portion of the population. Peace, unity, and order were the pillars of Edgar's nearly 2-decade-long reign, and his work helps to fully solidify the unity of the young Kingdom of England. The ultimate foundation of England was a long and shaky process. From the initial immigration of the Anglo-Saxons into the region to the establishment of their first kingdoms, extending into the invasion and rule of the Vikings, it wasn't until the Anglo-Saxons began to seize territory from the Danelaw that an inkling of modern-day England could be seen. After a series of conquering, being conquered, reconquering, and so on, the Anglo-Saxons eventually united the existing kingdoms throughout England. From there, it was merely a matter of establishing solid borders, maintaining their captured territory in order to keep their kingdom physically solid, and eventually, under the rule of Edgar the Peaceful, building the foundational laws and structures of what we know now as the Kingdom or Nation of England.
Okay. You know what? This is a good video. This is a damn good video, Knowledgia. Yeah, as I said, they had to bring, 10 minutes. Realistically, if you wanted to properly cover, the formation of England, that's going to be probably a 2-hour video. At the least, in my opinion. But they did a really good job here. And yeah, for me, I love Anglo-Saxon history. It's so interesting to me. That back and forth, and just the roots of paganism to the conversion of Christianity, all that, and then like the interactions of the Anglo-Saxons with their neighbors, the Britons, Welsh, the Picts to the north, and then of course, as they said, the Irish, or well, the Scots of Ireland, right? It's a little weird calling people of Ireland Scots, but that's really what they were. That's like a Celtic people group. And a lot of Ireland would also be like Scot and Pict, like they'd be a mixture of it a little bit, like Irish, Celtic, whatever. They're a hodgepodge of remaining Celtic people. But yeah, how was England formed by Knowledgia. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.